Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story Circle. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Janet Ferone, and I'm on the other side of the world in Boston, Massachusetts. And my story is one of being an educator for many, many years. And I'll start with my origins. I grew up in New York City, Brooklyn in particular, attended New York City public schools. My parents were second generation Italian immigrants. My grandparents spoke Italian. My family spoke English, and they were very much wanted to be American. I was always really enjoyed school. But then in later years, when I became more of a feminist, I decided I wasn't going to do one of those typical female professions, nurse or a teacher. So I graduated from the university and I designed my own major, which really was like a gender studies major. The title was Gender Correlates of Human Behavior. I've always been focused on strong women, women's issues. But then when you graduate with that type of a degree, not a lot of jobs out there. I was lucky to get work at a cerebral palsy school, students who had physical handicaps. And I became a teacher aide there, and I realized, wow, I do love education, and maybe this is really where I should be looking for a career. So I went on, got my master's degree in special education, and became a special ed teacher. Moved up to Boston from New York. It was a little more manageable than being in the Big Apple. And I've been here for a very long time. So I came up, got a job right away with blind and retarded adults, as they called it at that time. We don't use that terminology. And then I got into public schools, teaching learning disabilities. But what I really found is I did really well working with the kids with behavioral challenges. And I worked at a school that was specifically for that population. And pretty much all my career, they're kids that have come from very impoverished homes, families that are really struggling. So they didn't have the best foundation. And a lot of the behaviors can be attributed to that trauma that they experienced. And I always seemed to do really well with that. While I was at that job in my 20s, they asked me if I would take on an administrative role as a special ed coordinator. And I really loved the law. I really enjoyed, knowing all the legalities about the services and what the students would be entitled to and need. So I took that on. And then shortly, a few years later, I was invited to interview at the Boston Public Schools. I was at an event, an LGBTQ event, At the time, I was president of the National Organization for Women, and I was being awarded an allyship award, someone who was not in the LGBTQ identity, but had been doing so much political work in coalitions and really working towards helping with the gay rights movement. It was very easy for me as a straight woman to be out there. My job was not in danger. You know, this was the 80s when people were still getting losing jobs over sexuality. So I like to say that while I was there getting this award, the head of the Boston Public Schools Special Education Department was there, and he was friends with one of the men that I worked really closely with. And he invited me to interview for a directorship of an alternative program. What I like to say is that I'm probably the only one in the 80s who got a job because I was actively working for gay rights. So I took this job in the Boston Public Schools. It was in a neighborhood called Roxbury, the heart of the Black community in Boston, and a very large school, was known as kind of a dangerous school, a lot of gang activity, and a neighborhood that I was very comfortable there in the day, although many people weren't, but would not be very comfortable there at night. I was working with primarily Black and Brown students, African American students from the Caribbean, from different islands, and a large population over the years of students that would be identified as Hispanic. So I feel like that's always been where I did my best work, working with the type of difficult student. So I did that work for about, I was in the Boston Public Schools for about 33 years. And then I was moved to the central office promotion. But for me, not being around students, not being in a school, I decided that I was eligible for my retirement, and I would take that retirement and continue to do the consulting work that I had done, strictly word of mouth consulting, helping other schools out with their programming. I also, as I alluded to, had a background in activism, and I really worked in the schools to really be culturally responsive, to meet the needs of students, LGBTQ students, immigrant students, English language learners, all the students that would be in the margins. And I really came to appreciate how, if you are working to meet those students in the margin, it covers everyone. And I became a big fan of universal design for learning, and which, really makes the classroom fit the student rather than the other way around. So since I left the Boston schools, I've been doing a lot of work. I continue to consult, but I was approached by several colleges to work in their teacher preparation program. So I'm teaching graduate courses, but the most exciting thing for me now is that I'm working at this college, Curry College, Milton, Massachusetts, teaching in their DEI program. DEI normally stands for diversity, equity, inclusion, but this DEI is similar, but it's for teachers, and it is really working to make diverse and equitable instruction. Those are the letters. So I teach a culturally responsive education class, and I feel like my roots are coming from Italian immigrant family, being in the New York City public schools, which was very diverse racially, ethnically. And I feel like my affinity for cultures has really played into that. I am an international traveler. And a fun fact about me is I traveled through Asia for 7 months on my own when I was in my 30s, and met the man who has been my husband for over 30 years in an American country western bar in Malaysia. So we travel a lot. I immerse myself in different cultures. And I really feel like I've been able to be successful. I am a white woman, often working only with kids of color. I feel like I've really had to self reflect, really avoid, trying to be the white savior, but really connect with the kids, with their cultures, and see them for who they are from a strengths based approach, not from what was their behavior, what were they arrested for, what gang were they in. We're all people. We all have our past that often determines our future. So I just feel like I've been able to make an impact in that area and love it.
Wow. It sounds like your vocation found you and you found it, and a very fulfilling life you've had so far. So, can you elaborate on your therapeutic yet tough love approach and how it effectively helps students overcome their struggles?
That is a great question because what what I'm seeing now, and I'm a big believer in the trauma informed approach and really having that awareness. When I started working in the program that I mentioned in the 80s, we really didn't have a lot of theory. We didn't have, when I got the job, they said I would be using the strategies in the behavior management manual. And when I asked where it was, they said, well, you're going to have to write it. So I kind of went in just, but I feel like I was able to, the teachers who were in that program, I was the administrator. I didn't feel like most of them were well suited. They were also, nothing against white women, but they were all white women, and that didn't make any sense with our population. So I was able to hire a more diverse group, both racially and also age wise. So we had a father figure, the older brother figure. But what we did is come together and just really accept the students and try to meet them where they were. And part of that was really holding them accountable, not being afraid of them. I had kids in my office, they're 6 foot tall, they're very large, they're yelling at me, but backing down wouldn't do them any good. So we really had a team approach. We met twice a week religiously, went over what was going on with the students, included the clinical coordinator so that we really had the academic, the clinical approach. But we were not going to accept behavior. And I have students who come back and say to me, thank you. They don't come back and say, you were so nice. They say, thank you for holding me accountable. I'm where I am today because you didn't let me get away with everything. And parents would tell us too, don't let them get away with things. If they do it in the street, they'll get arrested. So I feel like they knew we loved them. I went to, their basketball games. Some of them got pregnant and had babies. I went to baby showers. We had funerals from kids who were killed by street violence. I would often be instrumental in planning the funeral because the families were unable. So the students saw that I wasn't, just there in my working hours, that they knew they could, rely on me for outside of work issues. And
Yes.
I think I might have mentioned that I had one student who's very grown. She's in her 50s, working in a Boston public school, having some issues there. And she contacted me and said, I didn't know who else to ask, but I knew I could trust you or the people in the YES program. So I feel like it's really been, we figured it out just on love and common sense. I think we didn't, like I said, have a lot of instructions, but coming together, that group of staff, it's kind of a family. I haven't worked with them for, it's been about 12 years now. We still have a group text, and we are still, If we see a former student, the deal is you take a selfie, and then everybody has to guess and see if they could remember their name.
Oh, I
This
love it.
Sunday, I was at a parade, and one of the staff I worked with was there. We had to take the selfie and put it in the group. Look who I'm with. So I feel like that energy that we had of, you know, kind of, I mean, we were a pretty much a functional family. I mean, we had squabbles and disagreements, but I think the kids felt that. They felt safe. One of the students who's encouraging me to write this book that I've been saying I'm going to write, she said, "You
Yeah.
need to write this book. We felt safer with all of you than we often did in our own homes." So
Oh,
that
wow.
accountability really, they felt something that, as another student said, by holding us accountable, you showed us that we were worth even more than we thought. So I feel like that's been a key element to success.
So, how did the multiracial and multi-generational team that you assembled contribute to the success of your programs? And what qualities did you look for in your staff?
Yeah, I mean, anyone in the education world, at least in the US, and I'm assuming it's worldwide, but in the US, we have a primarily white teaching staff, and our public schools often have majority students of color.
Mhm.
So, what you'll see over and over again in teachers of color, who become teachers, they talk about how they had that once they saw one teacher that looked
Mm.
like them, it made it possible for them. So, I think by our students seeing a diverse group, also seeing a diverse group of people getting along with each other, because we did have some varied political views. I know I was a bit unpopular with my strong gay rights stance and talking to my teachers about you can't be for civil rights for one group and then denying rights to another. And that took a while. Everybody came around. The times have changed. So, a lot of the students were coming from single mom households. They
Mhm.
didn't, a lot of the males, unfortunately, had rough lives and were not gainfully employed or, doing very well. So we had one older gentleman, Mr. Jones, amazing man. He was the strict father that some of them really needed. Very loving, but no nonsense, and nobody wanted to disappoint Mr. Jones. Then I had another, a younger teacher's aide, a young Black man. He dressed like the kids. He had the hoodie. He was the cool dude. He would keep the kids after school. I mean, he'd open his room after school. They would make beats, do music. Had a kid who was skilled at hair cutting. We bought him clippers, and he would give the kids haircuts after
Mhm.
school. So this was like the older brother that they had. And just a side note, this young man from years ago, I encouraged him, along with his wife, to make sure he went back to school for his teaching degree. And both of us finally worked on him enough. He did that. I hired him as a teacher. After I left, he became an assistant principal, and now
Wow.
he's a principal of his own school, and he's hired me as a consultant. So I tell
Ah,
everyone, look who's my boss now. So even with the staff, I feel like there was support for everyone to, do their best work.
that's
And
a
yeah, so
beautiful example of how things can go full circle, right?
exactly, yeah.
I love that. So, how important was community involvement in your approach? And can you discuss some specific ways that you and your team engaged with the students' communities?
Absolutely. One of the things the students I had, to put it bluntly, had been kicked out of other classrooms, other schools,
Mm,
even residential programs because of the level of their behavior. They
right.
also their parents, many of them lived in foster care, group homes. Grandmothers were raising multiple kids. We, as far as I can recall, we did not have one biological mom and dad. We had some step parents. So it really, the families were coming from rough situations. They also were dealing with a school department that wasn't always sensitive culturally. And studies show that when at a certain age, Black boys are viewed as 4.5 years older than their actual age, which makes them more scary. If a little white boy throws a paper or a book, it's okay, he's having a rough time. But if someone who you're perceiving as a teenager is doing something, so I think a lot of my students got a really bad deal and they were suspended often, their parents were called in. So we had parents who came ready to do battle. This was another school, they weren't going to take it. So we really had to engage with the community if we wanted success. We, I know we did open houses in community coffee shops so that people, the school that I was in, as I mentioned, in the evening was kind of a scary neighborhood. So we went out into different communities so that people could come to us. We also, when we had open houses, we made it a cultural night, and kids asked their parents to bring in food. We, on Thanksgiving, every year before Thanksgiving, I had already made my turkey because we would do a full Thanksgiving meal. So a lot of the kids, in the US, Thanksgiving is a big celebration of abundance. A lot of students were not having that. We would invite families. I also made it a point to call parents when their student did something well. I'd have to say, "This is Miss Ferone, but he's not in trouble." That was my greeting because once they heard my voice, but to really earn the trust. And then a lot of our students, the males, basketball was their love. So we went to the basketball games. Another student I have who herself is now a teacher, she I helped her get in this group called Teen Empowerment that did a lot of, as it sounds, community activities. I would go after hours to her events, and I kind of forgot about that. But she wrote a letter in support of an award that I got, and she talked about how that was such a turning point for her that I would show up, after work hours. So in order for the kids to feel like we really had their back, we knew who they were, we didn't just see them as, a kid in a seat. We really had to do that. And, I went graduation parties. Oh, you had to come, so we really all did that. One of my teachers I'm still in touch with him and he still does this. He has some events at his home and he invites teachers, he invites former students. So that connection, I have a former student who talk about gay rights. He came to us when the climate was really bad and it was really hard to keep him safe. He's now working in the Boston schools, supporting their gender sexuality alliances, and he's one of my guest speakers in my graduate course. So that community connection has just been in place and clearly meaningful as, the students are coming back. They have kids. Some of them have grandkids. I feel like a real senior citizen when I see that. But it was just so important. It was just so important.
That is just awesome. Now, throughout all of this, you have been working towards equity and social justice. How did your organization work with, how did your work with organizations like the Boston Now and your advocacy for LGBTQAI plus rights influence your educational practices and support the marginalized students?
Well, I think, I started out as a young feminist, and I brought that wherever I went. The school that I'm talking about was a vocational school. And one of the first things I did was kind of blow up the idea that the boys went to the carpentry shop and the girls had to go to daycare and hairdressing.
Right.
And I really worked with the students. I had a little girls group because in the special education world, we had 3/4 of our students were boys. So the girls were already getting a bit of a short shrift because of their, numbers.
Right.
The gym was always basketball. That's what the guys wanted to do. So physical education was basketball. And I said,
Mhm.
hey, we got to mix it up. And I was able to talk to the girls about what they wanted. They wanted to play ball with the guys, great. But we had one of the teachers do some yoga. We did some aerobics back in the day. That was the big exercise. So I feel like I went in with like, we are not seeing stereotypes in general. We're not seeing them about race. We're not seeing them about gender. And we are accepting of all sexualities, even when in those years, particularly in the Black community, the Black churches were very much against, the Bible says you don't, this is an abomination. The young man I referenced, he was living with a grandmother, and he came out to her at age 13. And she said, I still love you, but you can't be in my house if you're gay. There's demons. They talked about exorcism. So I really felt that we had to make that place a safe space with
Yeah.
students who are coming from that level of trauma around their very existence.
Mm.
So,
So let's talk about handling the trauma a little bit. What strategies did you find most effective in addressing the trauma and behavioral challenges of the students in your programs?
well, one of the things that is really stressed now, and we did this, even though it was almost a little bit against the way I functioned. I'm impulsive. I like to be flexible, but the
Mm.
students really needed predictability.
Right.
Um, Folks with trauma, if something unexpected happens, it's a little bit of a safety issue.
Yeah.
So we really had very clear, these are our guidelines, these are our behavioral guidelines, these are our academic guidelines. And we, use that for a sense of predictability.
Right.
We also had a lot of, and this was a little bit more of a behavioral approach that was popular years ago. Now we're really moving into, um, a little more relationship, although we did both. Again, coming back to that sort of tough love, we had a
Mhm.
lot of rewards for good behavior. We
Right.
also had a community meeting every Monday morning, and we started with kudos. So teachers and students could just raise their hand and say, I want to give a shout out to this student. I almost got into a fight, and he was there to kind of calm me down and pull me away. The teachers would say, really, want to give a shout out to this student. Math, he struggled with this algebra, but he stuck to it, and then he got the best score on the test. So we
Right.
did a whole lot of, we don't, we're not here to talk about what you did wrong and punish you. We're here to really, as they say, catch you doing good.
Yeah.
So we would do that. We would also have award ceremonies. A lot of the kids were struggling. They were not the best at this or that, but we had all these, most improved in math award. May not have
Yes.
gotten the highest score, but so these are students who never thought they would get an award. They were always the problem kids. So just really kind of wrapping around them as like, we really care about you. One of our messages was, we love you. We don't always like your behavior, but it's not the same thing. We, as a person, we're there for you. And we, really hope that we can help you, because when you go for a job, when you, hopefully go to college, you can't be, throwing your book across the room.
No, no, that doesn't work. Right. It sounds like you really embraced these kids and they felt the impact. So, how did you measure the success of your programs, talking about impact? And what key indicators did you use to determine their effectiveness?
I think what I'm going to say might sound a little morbid and dramatic, but we had so many students, particularly in the 80s when there really was a wave of violence. We had so
Mhm.
many students that were murdered as a result of street and gang violence.
Right.
So one of our measures was, you're alive and you're not in jail. That
Mm.
was sort of a baseline. But we really worked with students to say, you can go to college. And what
Right.
students didn't understand is they were in such high poverty categories. There was so much
Mhm.
scholarship money for them. They had it flipped in that, I don't have money, I can't go. And, we were able to say, no, no, it's the opposite. There's a whole lot for you. So we were able to do that. And like I said, we keep in touch. So many of our staff keep in touch, and students who maybe just being gainfully employed would have been a goal. I
Yeah.
mentioned I have a student who was top 3 Master Chef finalist in our US competition. Shout out to Christian Green, uh, up and coming Black chef in New Orleans. Another student who was asked to, by the judge, pick jail or pick the military. He picked the military. I didn't see him for 30 years. And he, up until he retired, I have a student who retired. He was a vice president of a security company, which was a little ironic because he did all the thieving and stealing as a youngster, and he knew how to work with that. Another student, professional cake baker, who is amazing. So I would say that we had kind of a baseline of survival for kids. And then after a certain point, when they got on their feet, I think the magic year is age 24, when the brain, we now know that brain development really kicks in around that time. I think a lot of them, and I would see kids on the street and they'd
Mm.
be working, and I'd say, wow, you're doing great. What's going on? Miss, you always try to tell me. I just couldn't hear it. I couldn't hear it. But a lot of them would say, I got a baby now. I got to do, my kid. So we really saw that sometimes it was just they had to hit a certain age for it to kick in. But I'm just so proud. And like I said, I really want to put this book out that will really highlight their successes and their struggles.
I love it. What a fulfilling career you've had.
Still doing it.
Yes. So can you
I'm
discuss
Yeah.
sorry?
Well, I'm doing now more work in colleges, so I'm working with teachers. So I feel like I'm not ready to just relax. I don't need the money to, I have a nice retirement, and I'm, doing extra work. But to really be able to pass these on to teachers, when I
Yeah,
take work now, it's not for money, it's for legacy.
I love
What
it.
can I leave behind? How can I help others? Really work with the students that a lot of people try to forget. So that's really, why I continue to do the work.
Okay. So my last question is, can you discuss how you tailored your educational approach to meet the diverse needs of students, particularly those from the marginalized backgrounds?
Sure. I was young and I got a master's degree in education. And it really didn't address any of that. And when I started working, um, it really was a lot of trial and error. You would see a kid not working, not doing that, and then one day you would see them respond to something. So you
Yeah.
filed it. Oh, that kid, like if you tell a story, you'll get that one engaged. Another one was, um, students are so petrified of reading out loud because they don't feel confident that if they are in the classroom expecting to be randomly called on, they can't even focus on the work sometimes.
Mhm.
So we would, make an agreement. We're not calling on anybody. You volunteer. And then for the ones who didn't volunteer, we'd say, okay, we'll call on you to read that short last page so you can pre-study that so that you can participate. So I think it really was just meeting kids where they were.
Yeah.
We also, the textbooks, particularly, things have changed a little, but all the books had those nice little white blonde kids that didn't
Yeah.
look like any. I was able to get grant funding. We were able to get more culturally appropriate books so that the kids could see themselves. We
Yes.
also had one teacher who was all about sports, and he was the math teacher. So he'd make the math problems geared to their basketball teams. And, so
Um,
everybody really thought about how can we make this relevant? How can we make it so that the kids don't feel like they're in a foreign country when they see, the white kids in rural Wisconsin in the cornfields. We're in the inner city. We don't know. I don't know about that at all. I grew up in New York City. I live in urban Boston. So just making it like it felt a comfort level with the approach and the material.
oh, I
And
love.
just quickly, I mentioned universal design for learning. That's
Yeah.
something that now I know as a concept, but it's basically offering everything to all the students, not just, oh, this student needs to hear it rather than see it. Just putting all the modalities out there, letting them watch video, letting them present to you. Maybe they can't do a written report. We would have kids do an oral report so they could show what they learned, write a song, a poem. We have one student, not the baker, but bake a cake with different layers that showed the science. We, and we just celebrated that, and they were a little celebrity for a while. All the kids were like, "Wow, cake!" And so just really allowing them to not fit the traditional mold, but making the environment more fit the student.
Yeah. Wow, what a fascinating project. It's been an absolute pleasure connecting with you at this level and seeing that there are organizations out there that are sensitive to the issues of the children that you are actually working with and the students, and giving them that opportunity to perform at whatever level they can perform at so they can excel. So thank you so much for your work. Absolutely fascinating.
So wonderful to connect with you. Thanks so much for your insightful questions and having me on your show.
My passion is around education. I believe education is a basic human right. It's a key that breaks the cycle of poverty for most people in marginalized communities. Did a lot for me and my family. So I'm really wanting to connect with educators out there in the world who are playing a bigger game. Like you said, for you now, it's all about legacy. I can just see the ripple effect of the thousands of children's lives you've touched. And it's not just their lives, it's their children and their children's children, which is absolutely beautiful. So thank you for being a living legacy. You didn't wait until you died and bequeathed the whole chunk of change for something good to happen. You get to see it in action as you live. So that is beautiful. Thanks so much, Janet.
And thank you.
And thank you to everybody who tuned in today. The Her Story Circle is a platform that brings you the voices and stories of women from all over the world. We share our stories to uplift, energize, inspire, and empower you. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and bye for now. Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep